those models, we're looking at over 300 millimeters of rain in the first 24 hours alone. That's extreme.
Yeah, and it's not just the rain. The wind speeds are climbing as well, looking at sustained gusts above 90 kilometers per hour. The system's deepening fast, and there's a strong likelihood of surface flooding in low-lying areas. Wellington's going to get hammered.
Okay, let's slow down for a second. You're saying 300 millimeters in a single day? That's already beyond what the city's drainage can handle. How long is this expected to last?
At least 4 days. The heaviest rainfall is going to be on day 1, but we're still looking at persistent downpours across the entire Wellington region through next week. Some areas could see accumulations exceeding 600 millimeters in total. The worst of it will be concentrated around the CBD, Lower Hutt, and coastal suburbs like Island Bay and Lisle Bay.
That's where things get dangerous. The storm drains will be completely overwhelmed within hours. Add in high tides, and you've got nowhere for that water to go. By the second or third day, we could see large-scale flash flooding, especially if there's any storm surge activity in the harbour.
Jesus! Have you spoken to NIWA about this? Are they seeing the same thing?
Yes, we've been cross-referencing. They're seeing similar projections, rainfall intensity, wind conditions, and flood risks all align with what we're seeing.
Alright, so let's talk worst-case scenario. What happens if this system stalls or intensifies?
If it stalls, the damage could be catastrophic. Floodwaters could reach up to 6 meters in low-lying areas. Parts of the motorway could be cut off, the airport would be out of commission, and there's potential for landslides along Eastbourne and parts of the Hutt Valley. That's not even considering infrastructure failure, power outages, water contamination, you name it.
That's a full-scale disaster. We need to bring this to the council today. If these projections hold, we're talking about mass evacuations in certain areas.
Yeah. We recommend issuing a preliminary public advisory as soon as possible. Maybe a radio and online bulletin tonight, then a more formal warning by tomorrow morning.
And people need time to prepare. If this thing hits as hard as we think, getting out after the rain starts might not be an option.
Understood. I'll push for an emergency meeting with the council this afternoon. We need to start planning evacuations for high-risk areas immediately.
Good. We'll keep you updated with hourly model runs. But as of right now, Wellington's about to get flooded badly.
Alright, we need to move quickly on this. I've read the report from Met Service, and frankly, the numbers are shocking. 300 millimeters of rain in a single day? That's more than some storms drop in a month. How certain are we that this will hit Wellington directly?
Extremely certain. Our models, along with NIWA's data, are showing a near 100% probability of severe rainfall hitting the Wellington region starting early on the 15th of August. The system is tracking slowly, meaning prolonged, intense rainfall over multiple days. Some areas could exceed 600 millimeters of total accumulation by the time this passes.
That amount of rain will absolutely overwhelm our drainage systems within hours. We are already looking at floodwaters reaching 3 meters in the CBD by midday on the 15th, with even higher levels in Lower Hutt and low-lying coastal suburbs.
The biggest concern right now is evacuations and emergency response logistics. If this storm surge hits the south coast as expected, places like Island Bay, Lisle Bay, and Miramar will be uninhabitable. We could see storm surges over 10 meters if the winds align with high tide.
And what's the risk to our infrastructure?
High. The winds will reach sustained speeds of 90 to 100 kilometers per hour, possibly higher near the Cook Strait.
That's why we need to activate the NZDF and RNZAF now. If the airport goes underwater, our only option for large-scale evacuations will be military helicopters and naval vessels.
I want a formal request for NZDF assistance sent to the government by the end of today. We need C-130 Hercules and NH-90 helicopters on standby at Ohakea Air Base, and naval ships prepped in Auckland and Devonport to assist if necessary.
Agreed. We also need to prepare welfare centres outside of Wellington. Palmerston North, Masterton, even Christchurch might need to take evacuees if this gets worse than expected.
We should also consider a staged evacuation of high-risk areas. If we wait until the flooding starts, we risk mass casualties. We need to warn the public tomorrow morning and start encouraging voluntary evacuations for at-risk communities.
I don't want to cause panic, but we must prioritize safety. What about emergency supplies?
We have enough food, water, and medical supplies in Wellington for about 4 days, but beyond that, we'll need resupply flights from the RNZAF or deliveries by sea. If State Highway 1 is impassable, the city could be effectively cut off.
We'll draft the public messaging immediately. Should we issue an official civil defence emergency declaration now?
No, not yet. We'll issue it by the 14th if conditions continue to deteriorate. But by then, we need people out of harm's way.
Understood. We'll proceed with all preparations immediately.
high-risk area, consider relocating now while travel remains safe. Residents should expect widespread power outages due to heavy rain and wind damage to infrastructure. It is advised to secure outdoor items, avoid unnecessary travel, and stay indoors once a storm makes landfall. If floodwaters begin rising rapidly, seek higher ground immediately and do not attempt to drive through flooded streets. A state of evacuation for low-lying areas may be declared in the coming days. Stay tuned to emergency broadcasts for further updates. This has been a civil defense emergency weather alert for the Wellington region. Please stay informed, prepare accordingly, and remain alert to future updates. Further information is available on MAPSIMA's Civil Defense and Regional Council websites. Stay safe and take care.
This is One News at midday. Authorities have issued an early warning for the Wellington region as a major weather system approaches, bringing torrential rain and severe winds in the coming days. The Met Service and civil defense organizations have urged residents in low-lying and flood-prone areas to take precautions, as rainfall levels could exceed 300 mm within the first 24 hours of landfall. As a result, more than 2,500 people have already evacuated from at-risk suburbs, while many others are staying put and reinforcing their homes. With the weather alert now in effect, business closures have begun across the city, with only essential services such as hospitals, emergency responders, and supermarkets remaining open for as long as conditions allow. Public transport is still operational, but authorities warn that some services may be suspended as the storm worsens. Meanwhile, schools are set to close early next week, and local officials are considering further evacuation measures for the most vulnerable areas. Civil Defense is urging Wellington residents to remain vigilant and stay informed through official emergency broadcasts and updates. Power outages and road closures are expected, and authorities stress that once the storm hits, travel could become extremely dangerous. Further updates will be provided as the situation develops, but for now, residents are advised to finalize their preparations and take all necessary precautions. In other news,
Attention all vessels within the Cook Strait area. This is a maritime weather warning issued by the New Zealand Maritime Safety Authority, NZMSA. A severe weather system is approaching, with conditions deteriorating rapidly over the next 24 hours. The expected heavy rainfall and strong winds will create hazardous maritime conditions, including high waves, rogue waves, and significant turbulence. This broadcast is issued on VHF Channel 16 and HF Channel 2182 kHz, effective immediately and until further notice. The weather system is predicted to impact the Wellington region only tomorrow morning, bringing winds gusting up to 130 km per hour and rainfall rates exceeding 300 mm in some areas. This will lead to treacherous conditions in the Cook Strait, with wind-driven waves and the possibility of sudden rogue waves reaching up to 10 meters in height. All vessels are to immediately cease all navigation activities and remain docked at the nearest port, if possible. We urge you to avoid all crossings through the strait as conditions are expected to worsen rapidly and without warning. For those already underway, make immediate arrangements to dock at the closest port and remain sheltered. Waters until the storm passes. Vessels found navigating in the Cook Strait will be subject to penalties, and the risk of being beached or driven ashore by floodwaters and high winds is imminent. The risk of severe damage to vessels is high, and the safety of personnel is paramount. All ships in the region are prohibited from proceeding through the strait, and strict adherence to these measures is required. Ports across the region are prepared for emergency docking operations, but space may be limited due to the high volume of incoming vessels. Ensure that you maintain close communication with port authorities on VHF Channel 12 and listen for any further updates. If unable to dock, stay well clear of any coastal areas to avoid the risk of being driven ashore by the storm surge and rising floodwaters.
important announcement from airport operations regarding the severe weather system expected to impact the Wellington region tomorrow. Due to the incoming storm front, the airport is temporarily closed until further notice, effective immediately. All flights scheduled for departure or arrival are delayed and will not resume operations until conditions permit, likely no earlier than Wednesday on August 17th. Please listen carefully for further updates on this situation. We strongly advise all passengers to remain inside the terminal until additional instructions are provided. For those who are already in transit, please note that all incoming flights will be redirected to alternative airports, such as Palmerston North Airport and Paraparaumu Airport. You will receive detailed instructions regarding these alternative arrangements through airline staff, and we ask for your patience and understanding during this time. For those of you who need overnight accommodation, the airport has arranged for emergency hotel housing in nearby locations, including Wellington's Central Business District. Transport to these hotels will be provided by airport shuttles, and priority accommodation will be given to families, elderly passengers, and those with special needs. Please report to the airline desk for more details on hotel assignments, and be sure to keep your boarding pass with you for smooth check-in. At this time, passengers are entitled to compensation for any costs incurred during the extended delay, including meals and accommodations. Please approach your airline's customer service desk for assistance with the claims process. We apologize for any inconvenience caused by this disruption, and we appreciate your cooperation as we work to ensure your safety. We will continue to provide updates through further announcements and on our websites. And passengers are encouraged to monitor display screens for further information regarding flight schedules and gate assignments. Please remain vigilant and take all necessary precautions. Thank you for your understanding, and we apologize again for the inconvenience.
Attention all aircraft operating within Wellington airspace. This is an urgent advisory from Wellington Air Traffic Control. Due to the approaching severe weather system, Wellington Airport and the surrounding controlled airspace will close to all civilian aircraft effective 0600 NZST, August 15th, 2022, until further notice. All inbound aircraft are instructed to divert to alternative airports immediately as worsening conditions will make further operations unsafe. The closure includes all IFR and VFR flights, with exceptions only for emergency and military operations. Current meteorological data from Met Service indicates wind speeds exceeding 90 knots at altitude, with severe wind shear, turbulence, and possible microbursts expected below 10,000 feet. Heavy precipitation will result in severely reduced visibility below 500 meters, and downdrafts along approach paths will make safe landings impossible. Pilots are advised to anticipate strong crosswinds exceeding aircraft limitations, particularly on approach and departure. Flight crews should remain aware of the potential for icing above 8,000 feet, and unexpected wind shifts due to the rapid development of the storm. SEL. All flights scheduled to arrive at Wellington are instructed to divert immediately to Palmerston North, Christchurch, or Auckland as primary alternates. Paraparaumu is available for select aircraft, but may also experience high winds and heavy rain, making it unreliable for larger jets. Wellington Air Traffic Control will cease operations at 0600 New Zealand Standard Time, at which point all aircraft within the region must be under en route control or have landed at a designated alternate. All aircraft currently parked at Wellington International must remain secured and are advised to prepare for gust fronts that may exceed the structural limits of light aircraft. Operators with aircraft currently scheduled to arrive in Wellington tomorrow should coordinate with their airlines and flight planning teams to reroute flights well in advance. The Royal New Zealand Air Force has been placed on standby at RMZAF Base Ahagia for potential emergency evacuations or assistance in extreme conditions. Emergency fuel and logistical support will be available at RMZAF Woodburn for diverted aircraft if needed. Wellington ADC will continue issuing advisories on 122.3 MHZ and 118.8 MHZ4. En route aircraft and 121.9 MHZ for ground operations. Further updates will be provided via NOTAM's and as conditions develop. All pilots are urged to exercise extreme caution and prioritize safety during this critical weather event.
This is a regional civil defence emergency broadcast issued at 8 AM New Zealand Standard Time on all regional radio frequencies, television broadcasts, and online emergency services channels. This is an extreme weather emergency warning for all residents in the Wellington region, Lower Hart, Upper Hart, Porarua, and surrounding areas. This alert is broadcast from the Wellington Emergency Management Office and issued by Met Service New Zealand, the National Emergency Management Agency, and Wellington Civil Defence. This alert will remain in effect until further notice, with updates provided as conditions evolve. At 8 o'clock AM New Zealand Standard Time, a severe weather event made landfall over Wellington with predictions that it will unleash over 380 millimeters of rainfall in the first 24 hours, far exceeding initial projections. Wind speeds have been recorded at over 90 km per hour, gusting higher in exposed areas, creating hazardous conditions. Flash flooding has already been reported in low-lying parts of central Wellington, the Hutt Valley, and coastal areas, with water levels rising rapidly. The storm is expected to intensify over the coming hours, with conditions deteriorating throughout the day. All schools, universities, and public offices across the Wellington region are closed until further notice, with the exception of emergency response services, hospitals, and essential infrastructure operations. Businesses are strongly advised to cease operations immediately, and all non-essential travel is highly discouraged. Areas at significant flood risk include Lambton Quay, Kilburnie, Thorndon, Lower Hart, Upper Hart, and Petone, with emergency responders monitoring the situation closely. Residents in these areas should be prepared for worsening conditions and take immediate action if instructed to evacuate. A voluntary evacuation advisory has been issued for residents in Petone, Lower Hart, Thorndon, and coastal communities along Wellington Harbour. Those in these areas should gather essential belongings, including identification, medications, food, water, and clothing, and proceed to designated evacuation routes. Motorists are strongly urged to avoid submerged roads, as flash floods are unpredictable and may sweep vehicles away. Residents should follow official instructions from emergency responders and avoid attempting to cross floodwaters on foot or by vehicle. Evacuation shelters have been set up north of the Wellington region to accommodate displaced residents. The following shelters are now operational: Draw Paraha Arena, Porarua, capacity 1,200 people; Walton Ash Centre, Lower Hart, capacity 1,500 people; Upper Hart Cossey Club, Upper Hart, capacity 800 people; El Rancho Camp, Waikani, capacity 600 people; Kapiti College Gym, Paraparaumu, capacity 1,000 people; Masterton Town Hall, Masterton, capacity 1,500 people. Residents in high-rise buildings are advised to seek higher floors if unable to evacuate safely. Emergency maritime evacuations are underway for residents in Eastbourne and Days Bay, with ferries and private vessels assisting in transporting evacuees to Lower Hutt and Petone. Public transport services, including Metlink buses and trains, will continue running until 2 o'clock PM New Zealand Standard Time, after which all services will be suspended for safety reasons. The Wellington railway station remains open as an emergency transit hub, with limited capacity for those seeking relocation to northern towns. Air services at Wellington Airport remain suspended until further notice. Residents should expect widespread power outages as strong winds and flooding impact electrical infrastructure. If conditions worsen, a mandatory evacuation order may be issued for specific flood-prone suburbs. Remain indoors, avoid unnecessary travel, and do not attempt to enter floodwaters. Updates will continue to be issued via radio, television, and official emergency channels. This is a serious weather emergency. Take call warnings seriously and act accordingly.
Good afternoon, we are coming to you live with an urgent update on the worsening flood crisis in Wellington. As of 4 p.m, floodwaters have risen to at least 3 meters in several low-lying areas, including the Wellington Viaduct, the airport tarmac, and parts of Lower Hutt and Pet 1. Roads in these regions are completely submerged, making it nearly impossible for residents to evacuate unless assisted by emergency crews. The flooding has also cut off key transport routes, including State Highway 1 at the Basin Reserve and the Hutt Road, leaving many stranded. With conditions deteriorating, all public transport services have now been suspended, including Metlink buses, trains, and ferries. Wellington Airport remains fully closed, with aircraft grounded and the terminal partially flooded. Reports indicate that several businesses along the waterfront, including Shed 5 and Dockside, are underwater. And emergency responders are working to assist people trapped in office buildings and apartments in the Landton Harbour area. Civil Defence has issued a final evacuation notice for those in low-lying suburbs, warning that floodwaters may continue rising overnight. Rescue efforts are now focused on deploying NZDF personnel and boats to reach those still stranded. Emergency shelters in Porirua, Upper Hutt, and Kapiti are reaching capacity as more residents seek safety further north. Authorities are urging the public to avoid travel at all costs, remain indoors if safe, and move to higher ground if in at-risk areas. We will continue to bring you updates as this unprecedented weather event unfolds.
Good morning. This is RNZ News with the latest updates on the ongoing weather event affecting Wellington. As of 10 a.m, heavy rainfall continues to batter the capital, with an additional 50 millimeters recorded in the past 12 hours. Floodwaters in low-lying areas have now surpassed 5 meters, leaving entire neighborhoods submerged and inaccessible. Emergency services and NZDF personnel are struggling to conduct rescues as conditions rapidly deteriorate. The situation in Wellington Harbour has taken a turn for the worse, with reports confirming that a large commercial vessel has sunk near the ferry terminal. Maritime authorities believe the ship, which was battling extreme waves and strong currents, was unable to maintain stability in the worsening conditions. All crew members were rescued before the vessel went under, but debris and fuel leaks are now posing an additional hazard to rescue operations. The Inter-Islander and all ferry services remain suspended indefinitely. In the city itself, the iconic Te Papa Museum is now completely flooded, with water reaching the second floor of the building. Authorities have confirmed that priceless artifacts and exhibits are at severe risk of damage or destruction. Meanwhile, floodwaters have reached the central business district, with streets around Lambton Quay, Willa Street, and Cuba Street now resembling deep canals. The Beehive and Parliament buildings are partially submerged, with officials evacuating key personnel as water levels continue to rise. Civil Defence is urging any remaining residents in at-risk areas to evacuate immediately. The worst-hit suburbs, including Kilbirnie, Lyle Bay, and Lower Hutt, are now uninhabitable, with emergency crews prioritising rescues in these areas. Evacuation centres in Porirua, Upper Hutt, and the Kapiti coast are reaching capacity, and more shelters are being set up further north. The NZDF has deployed additional personnel and aircraft to assist with evacuations. As conditions worsen, authorities warn that power and communication outages may increase throughout the region. The public is advised to conserve battery power, avoid unnecessary movement, and stay tuned to emergency broadcasts for further updates. With no immediate relief in sight, the focus remains on rescue efforts and preventing further loss of life.
Good afternoon. This is News Hub with the latest on Wellington's devastating flood crisis. Overnight rainfall has pushed floodwaters beyond 6 meters in some areas, with entire suburbs now fully submerged. Emergency services report multiple incidents of people trapped in their homes, including in Thorndon and Mount Cook, where rooftops are the only areas still above water. Meanwhile, a partial building collapse in Lower Hutt has left at least 5 people missing, as structural failures increase across the region. Adding to the chaos, several landslides have been reported along State Highway 2 and Ngaranga Gorge, cutting off key evacuation routes. Reports indicate that a Wellington Free ambulance vehicle was caught in the floodwaters near Evans Bay, forcing paramedics to swim to safety. The New Zealand Defence Force has begun airlifting stranded residents from rooftops. While officials confirm that all remaining hospitals in Wellington are now running on backup generators due to power failures. With the storm still unleashing its full force, the situation remains dire and unpredictable.
This is an official emergency broadcast issued by the New Zealand Civil Defence, Met Service, and the Wellington Regional Emergency Management Office. At 6 p.m. New Zealand Standard Time on August 16, 2022, a tsunami warning has been issued for the southern coastlines of Wellington, including Island Bay, Lyall Bay, and surrounding areas. This broadcast is being transmitted on all local radio frequencies, emergency channels, and online platforms. Residents in affected areas are urged to take immediate action as this warning remains in effect until further notice. A 10-meter high storm surge is currently moving inland, triggered by the extreme weather system impacting Wellington. Floodwaters from the surge have already breached Lyall Bay and parts of Rongotai, with the airport completely inundated and significant structural damage reported. The surge is expected to move further inland within the next 15 minutes, with high winds and debris worsening conditions. Anyone in low-lying coastal areas must evacuate to higher ground immediately, as further surges are expected throughout the night. If you are in a coastal evacuation zone, head for higher ground immediately. Safe locations include the Brooklyn Hill, Mount Victoria, and surrounding elevated suburbs. Do not attempt to evacuate by car, as roads are already heavily flooded and congested. If you are unable to leave your home, move to the highest floor or roof and signal for rescue if necessary. Emergency response teams will prioritize rooftop rescues once conditions allow. When evacuating, bring only essential items, including water, food, medications, identification, and emergency supplies. If possible, bring a flashlight or whistle to signal for help. The New Zealand Defence Force and emergency responders are mobilising search and rescue operations, but severe weather is complicating efforts. Do not return to flooded areas until an official all clear is given. Stay away from floodwaters, as they may contain hazardous debris, strong currents, and down power lines. Avoid bridges, tunnels, and low-lying roadways. Power outages and communication failures are ongoing. It is advised to keep a battery-powered radio tuned to emergency channels for further updates. This is an ongoing emergency. Remain on high alert and continue to follow official instructions. This concludes this emergency broadcast. Stay safe and remain vigilant.
The devastation across Wellington's southern coast is catastrophic, with at least 42 confirmed deaths and hundreds more missing after the 10-meter storm surge tore through Island Bay and Lyall Bay. The Wellington airport is completely destroyed, with aircraft and debris scattered across the flooded tarmac. Reports confirm dozens of vehicles were swept into the harbor, while a passenger ferry docked at Queen's Wharf broke loose and was swept away, with emergency teams still searching for survivors. Entire neighborhoods along the coast have been wiped out, with floodwaters reaching as far as Kilburney and parts of Miramar. Emergency services have described scenes of utter devastation, with homes, businesses, and vital infrastructure either underwater or reduced to rubble. Power outages are widespread, and communications remain severely disrupted, complicating rescue efforts. The NZDF and civil defense teams are now conducting mass search and rescue operations, prioritizing those still stranded on rooftops or in floodwaters. Authorities warn the death toll will likely rise as more bodies are recovered from collapsed buildings and submerged streets. Some of the worst-hit areas, including Moa Point and Breaker Bay, are still inaccessible, with rescuers struggling against strong currents and hazardous debris. As night falls, thousands remain displaced, with evacuation centers at full capacity and emergency aid struggling to reach those still trapped. The government has declared a state of national emergency, calling for immediate international assistance to deal with the scale of the disaster.
Widespread power outages have crippled much of Wellington, with entire suburbs plunged into darkness and communications failing across the region. Many news and radio stations are now offline, making it increasingly difficult for emergency services to coordinate rescue operations. Civil defense warns that restoring power could take days, as floodwaters have severely damaged electrical substations and key infrastructure. Authorities have issued urgent warnings about large undocked vessels adrift in Wellington Harbour, posing significant risks to rescue efforts and remaining structures. A cargo ship, believed to have broken loose from its moorings, has drifted through the CBD before coming to rest against the flooded Te Papa Museum, causing further structural damage. There are reports of smaller boats being pushed into city streets, adding to the already chaotic debris field left by the storm surge. With government buildings compromised and key locations inaccessible, the whereabouts of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet remain uncertain. Officials state that the government has relocated to an emergency operations centre outside of Wellington, but further updates have been limited due to communication failures. The National Crisis Management Centre has assured the public that government operations are still ongoing, with Defence Force personnel assisting in relief efforts. The death toll has now risen to at least 86, with fears that many more remain unaccounted for. Search and rescue teams are still working through the devastated coastal areas and flooded city streets, pulling bodies from collapsed buildings and submerged vehicles. Hundreds of Wellington residents
Wellington remains in crisis as widespread power outages persist, leaving tens of thousands without electricity, communications, or access to emergency broadcasts. With floodwaters still rising, many survivors have taken refuge on higher ground, including Mount Victoria, Tinakori Hill, and parts of Kilburn, where emergency services are struggling to deliver aid. The situation has been worsened by at least 5 large vessels, including cargo ships and fishing boats, now adrift in the harbor, with authorities warning of further collisions and structural damage to the city. Several key landmarks in Wellington's CBD are now completely submerged, including the Beehive, Te Papa Museum, and Wellington Railway Station, with floodwaters reaching several meters high. Vehicles, shipping containers, and debris from collapsed buildings have been swept through the streets, making rescue operations increasingly dangerous. Emergency responders are urging anyone still stranded to seek the highest possible ground, as conditions remain unpredictable and aftershocks from the storm surge continue to destabilize the region.
Widespread flooding remains severe across Wellington following the catastrophic storm surge and tsunami impact on August 16th. Floodwaters have exceeded 5 meters in multiple areas, leaving parts of the CBD, Lower Hutt, and the south coast completely submerged. Power outages are affecting over 80% of the region, with major disruptions to communications, transport, and emergency response. Weather conditions remain unstable, with further heavy rain forecasted in the coming hours. Wellington Airport is destroyed and remains completely inoperable. Roads and railways are impassable, with significant damage to State Highway 1 and State Highway 2, cutting off access to northern evacuation routes. Public transport is non-operational, with only limited Royal New Zealand Air Force and New Zealand Defence Force assistance available for evacuation. Inter-Islander and Bluebridge ferry terminals are underwater. No maritime travel between islands is possible. With floodwaters still rising in some areas, Civil Defence is urging all remaining residents in low-lying areas to evacuate to higher ground immediately. Confirmed evacuation sites: Mount Victoria Lookout, over 3,500 people sheltering. Tinakori Hill, over 2,000 people present. Wrights Hill Fortress, emergency shelter set up, now at 80% capacity. Karori Park and Community Centre, accepting evacuees, limited supplies available. Emergency responders are prioritising airlifts and supply drops to stranded individuals. Confirmed fatalities: at least 127 reported dead, numbers expected to rise. Missing persons: over 600 plus unaccounted for, search and rescue efforts ongoing. Injuries: thousands reported injured, with emergency services overwhelmed. Maritime disaster: a cargo ship ran aground near Te Papa Museum, worsening structural damage in the area.
This is an emergency action notification issued by the New Zealand Civil Defence and Emergency Management, the Wellington Regional Emergency Coordination Centre, and Radio New Zealand. This alert is being broadcast on all television, radio, and emergency frequencies due to an immediate and catastrophic landslide event occurring in Eastbourne. All residents in Eastbourne and surrounding areas must evacuate immediately to higher ground. Emergency responders are en route, but conditions are deteriorating rapidly. At approximately 3:50 p.m. New Zealand Standard Time, massive landslides have begun along the Eastbourne coastal cliffs, with entire sections of land collapsing into the Wellington harbour. Preliminary estimates suggest that over 500,000 cubic meters of earth have already shifted, submerging multiple homes and roads. Further collapses are imminent, threatening Sunshine Bay, Days Bay, and nearby settlements. Reports indicate that entire neighborhoods are being swept into the harbor, and additional landslides may occur within the next 10 to 15 minutes. If you are in the affected areas, evacuate immediately to higher ground. Do not attempt to retrieve belongings. Do not waste time. Leave on foot if necessary, and move as fast as possible. If you are near the shoreline, move inland and uphill immediately. The ground is unstable, and additional collapses could occur without warning. If you cannot evacuate in time, move to the highest point of your home, or nearest solid structure and await rescue. Do not take vehicles. Roads are collapsing, and traffic will become impossible within minutes. If you are already on high ground, stay where you are, and assist others if possible. Shelter in place, only if evacuation is impossible. Roads in and out of Eastbourne are now impassable due to landslides and floodwaters. Maritime Road, Marine Drive, and Pinkero Coast Road are blocked. The only safe evacuation routes are on foot to the ridgelines north of Eastbourne. Avoid low-lying areas, bridges, and any roads near steep cliffs. The soil is unstable, and further landslides may occur. Do not return to Eastbourne after evacuating. The ground remains highly unstable, and rescue operations will take time to clear debris and assess damage. Emergency services will conduct search and rescue missions once it is safe, but conditions remain extremely hazardous. Wait on high ground until authorities declare it safe to move. This is a life-threatening situation. Evacuate immediately. Do not delay. Leave now.
As of 9 a.m. today, weather conditions have shown significant improvement. According to Met Service and NIWA, the frequency and intensity of rainfall in the Wellington region have drastically reduced. The heavy rain that plagued the area over the past 48 hours has begun to settle, with more manageable, sporadic showers expected throughout the day. Although the worst of the storm has passed, residents are advised to remain cautious as there may still be localized flooding and hazardous conditions in certain areas. Floodwaters across the Wellington region, especially in the Wellington CBD, Lyell Bay, and surrounding areas, are beginning to recede as rainfall decreases. While the floodwaters have not completely dissipated, the worst has passed and water levels are dropping slowly but steadily. Civil defence teams are still on the ground in affected neighbourhoods, assessing the situation and helping with evacuation where necessary. Emergency personnel are focusing on areas where water remains above ground level, conducting search and rescue missions and assisting with evacuation to higher ground. While the rainfall has reduced, high winds and unstable ground conditions remain a significant concern for parts of Wellington. Landslides and rockfalls are still possible in hilly areas, particularly Eastbourne, Lyell Bay, and the Miramar Peninsula. Emergency teams have issued warnings for all residents in elevated or unstable areas to remain alert to shifting conditions. There may still be localized hazards including damaged infrastructure, downed power lines, and areas prone to additional flooding as water continues to drain. The areas most severely affected by flooding, including Eastbourne, Miramar, and Lyell Bay, continue to experience unprecedented levels of damage. Infrastructure in these regions is severely compromised, with roads, homes, and businesses submerged under several meters of water. In Miramar, reports indicate extensive damage to homes and local facilities, and Island Bay is seeing widespread destruction, especially along the coastal zones. Local authorities have restricted access to these areas, advising that they are unsafe and uninhabitable due to extensive flooding and infrastructure failure. Civil defence and local rescue teams continue to prioritise the evacuation and assistance of vulnerable residents, focusing on high-risk locations still underwater. While rain has subsided, waterlogged areas remain hazardous. Rescue teams are conducting house-to-house evacuations in flooded regions, with assistance to elderly residents, families, and those with mobility challenges. Volunteers and emergency services are working tirelessly to transport those displaced to temporary shelters and to provide relief and medical support where needed.
Following 2 days of intense storms and catastrophic flooding, the situation in Wellington is beginning to stabilize, but the damage is extensive. While the worst of the rain has subsided, authorities are dealing with collapsed infrastructure, particularly in Eastbourne and Lisle Bay, where roads, bridges, and buildings have been destroyed. Mass casualty events have been reported, especially near Wellington Harbour, where entire neighborhoods were submerged by rising waters and debris. In addition to the flooding, high winds and landslides continue to pose significant risks to certain areas. Power outages remain widespread across the region, making rescue operations more difficult. Te Papa Museum has been completely flooded, and several ships remain adrift in the harbor, adding further strain to the already overwhelmed emergency services. As the recovery efforts begin, authorities are urging everyone to stay away from hazardous areas and remain in safe, elevated locations until rescue teams arrive.
This is an official or clear message issued by Civil Defence and the Wellington Regional Council at 6 p.m. on 18 August 2022. After several days of severe weather and flooding, this message signifies a marked improvement in conditions across the region. Please listen carefully to the following important updates. Residents of Wellington are now permitted to return to most areas, as the rainfall has subsided and flooding has receded significantly. While the worst of the weather has passed, businesses will remain closed temporarily until recovery teams have had the opportunity to assess the damage and confirm the safety of reopening. We advise residents to proceed with caution, as recovery efforts are still underway in certain areas. However, it is important to note that some areas remain off-limits due to the damage caused by the storm. Eastbourne, most of the southern coast, and Wellington Airport are still considered uninhabitable, as are parts of Miramar Peninsula. Please avoid these areas and do not attempt to return to your properties in these zones at this time. Preliminary reports indicate significant devastation throughout the Wellington area. The death toll has tragically reached over 500 people, and the damage to infrastructure is extensive. Key buildings, including the Te Papa Museum and several skyscrapers in the Wellington CBD, have suffered irreparable damage. Some structures, particularly in the CBD, are scheduled for demolition due to the floodwaters compromising their foundations. Recovery efforts are expected to take several months, with a focus on restoring essential services and ensuring the safety of residents in the affected areas. In the meantime, shelters and emergency services are available for displaced residents. We recommend that residents seek refuge in designated emergency accommodation and avoid returning to damaged homes until recovery teams declare areas safe. We urge everyone to remain vigilant, adhere to all safety advice, and continue supporting each other through the recovery process. We will continue to provide updates as more information becomes available. Please stay safe, and thank you for your cooperation.
It has now been 3 days since the devastating storm and tsunami that wreaked havoc across Wellington. The official death toll has now surpassed 1,200 people, with damages estimated at over $800 million across all affected areas, making this one of the worst natural disasters in the region's history. Recovery efforts have been ongoing, with the cargo ship that drifted into the Wellington CBD finally removed from the area, after extensive work to clear the wreckage. The Te Papa Museum, which suffered irreparable damage, has been demolished, marking the loss of one of the capital's most iconic buildings. Despite the devastation, the resilience of Wellington's residents remains unwavering, as a new Wellington-based weather department has been established to better prepare for future events. In addition, a national memorial will be created to honor the lives lost during this tragedy, with plans to hold a public ceremony later this year. The people of Wellington have come together, showing remarkable strength and unity in the face of unimaginable challenges.